No shaking. Go lay down. Over here. Lay down. He says, love me, love me, love
So
me.
I must sit instead.
That's okay if it's to keep your feet off your... I don't want to shake your hand all afternoon. I have other things to do.
Hey friends, you're watching BrainStormAcres. I'm Henry.
And I'm Irene.
And that's Rufus, in case you didn't know. We had a bunch of questions that we thought we'd try to answer today. I plan to work outside. It's not as windy as it's ever been, but it's pretty blowy out there.
It's miserable. Rufus and I were out earlier this morning when it was, I mean, it was breezy, but it wasn't awful. And then all of a sudden the wind just came up and you just like, I mean, Rufus was standing nose into the wind and I was just kind of standing there with my head down waiting for it to stop. It was just miserable. I did manage to kill a few weeds today, but I planned to get a whole stack of stuff done outside.
It's gorgeous weather, but for the wind.
Yeah, if the wind would just stop, it'd be lovely. It's a great temperature, the sun is shining, it's lovely, but the wind is howling. And it's just like, it's disruptive. It even wakes up Rufus sometimes. He'll be laying there and all of a sudden he's like, what's that noise? And I'm like, yeah, it sounds like the building's coming down. When the wind's blowing this hard, if you were to start a fire...
Well, I did start a fire a week ago.
Yeah, fortunately not
I'm really
this week.
glad it was not
This week.
Hello.
Do we need to put two in your bed? He says maybe.
He says I'll lick the hand instead.
Yeah, really.
You know, we had a fire a week ago. I had a ember loft up out of the burn barrel from some cardboard I was burning, and it set a pile of debris that I've been trying to get burned for more than a year on fire, and that happened because everything was dried out, and I won't burn when the wind's coming up.
Well, one of the things that Henry and I have talked about before is when we throw water bottles or soda bottles or anything else like that into the burn barrel, you either have to take the lid off or you have to crush them so that there's no air in there. Because if they're normal, what can happen, because it happened to me, and that was a big lesson that I took from years ago, was it takes off like a bottle, like a rocket. It just, you wind up with a tiny little hole in it. The thing is now pressurized, and it'll shoot off. And it only takes one of those shooting off across the street on fire to convince me that I never wanted to do that again.
Yeah. So fortunately that didn't happen last week. It was really just a piece of cardboard or paper that lofted up from the heat and floated away on the wind.
Mm-hmm.
We had a bunch of questions that I think would be worth going over. One was, how long have we lived here?
It's got to be close to 18 years now.
Yeah, we bought the property in 2004. We moved here in 2005. So we've lived here for 17 and a half years. We've owned it for 18 years, actually almost 19 years. It's a nice place. We hadn't planned it to be full-time, but that's what it is, so that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
The next question was, what do we do? I'm retired. I do things around here. Mostly I do fix-it things that have to be fixed. But the other is I'll build new things that we need for a variety of purposes. A lot of things that relate to Irene's business, which is the next question. What's your business, Irene?
I do jewelry and dress accessories, so hooks and buckles and all kinds of odd bits and pieces of things for historic reenactors. I specialize mostly in stuff that's pre-1600s, but I also have a small horde of people who do colonial and Civil War and stuff like that buy from me. And then I also wholesale to some other people who are on the East Coast who deal with the Civil War and colonials all the time. They go to events there. It's too far for us. I have an online presence on Etsy, and then we go to actual events, which we are in the process of trying to get ready for one at the end of this month. So
we pack everything up in a 14-foot box truck.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of stuff. It's filled from the very front of that box all the way to the back, and it all comes out and gets set up at one of these events. It's quite a lot of work. Unfortunately, I'm not as useful as I used to be. Before my car accident, I could do a lot more. My car accident left me with some interesting problems, one of which is I end up with migraines with some kinds of sound. So frequently you'll see me at these events wearing headphones, and those headphones are really ear protectors.
Right. They're sound deadening protectors that allow... I still try not to have him drive any stakes. Part of the problem is you can't... I mean, we're marginal in terms of being a small business. And as with many small businesses, you have to do it all yourself. You can't afford to hire... In fact, we were talking about that, another merchant that we knew who retired 2 years ago, I guess. And we're like, I don't know how she ever made a dime. Because she would usually have 6 or 8 helpers. She was paying their entry fees into the events.
Which is some pretty big money.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, the cheapest event, and this was years ago, would be, say, $60 a piece. And then on top of that, some of them she was feeding. And I'm just like, you don't make anything when you do that. So we've always done it all ourselves, except and when we go to Pennsylvania, we have a couple that comes in to help us break down at the end of the event.
Right.
Because it's just a lot easier to have another pair of hands or two. Sometimes they're both working. Last year she wasn't feeling great, but she took care of the dog for us. And we always do that sort of thing. But he's a sturdy dude, and so somebody's taking care of the dog, and the other 3 of us are cranking along, working hard. We can get it down amazingly fast. It's actually a lot faster to take things down than it is to put things up, because when you're putting things up, you're figuring things out.
Now, there was a question. It's a very good question, and there's nothing meant by us bringing it up now, recently, about why Irene was wearing a mask when we were out with Rufus last week. And the answer is really quite simple. We are a small business. We both have some allergies that kick at this time of year because all of the pine trees that are around us.
It's pollen season for the pine trees.
So anything we can do to reduce the amount of pollen that we're breathing is a good thing. But
right.
The other thing is colds and the flu are a thing. They happen.
And there's been some nasty noroviruses going around too, the stomach bugs and stuff. And those will knock you on your can for weeks sometimes because you'll be tired for weeks afterwards.
So we can't afford to get sick. And we're coming up on an event that's about 600 miles away from us. It takes 2 days to get there, and then it's a day or a day and a half to set up, and then we're there for 4 days, and then we tear it down and come back for 2 days.
Right, and you've never lived until you've been really sick at an event.
We
have both done that, and that's really no fun.
Over the past 22 years or something, we've both been sick, really sick once.
Yeah, we both really got a bad stomach bug one year in Pennsylvania. Generally speaking, we're healthy people, but we're also older now. I'm 70.
You what?
It's true, I am.
Oh.
Yeah. So
I married an older woman.
He did, thank goodness. I could, if he was this decrepit and he was older than me, I'd be in real trouble. You can't risk it. And the Safeway that we were going to, we have a couple of enclaves here of people who do not believe in any vaccinations. I don't want to expose myself, even though I've either had the things or had the vaccinations for them. The more you're exposing yourself to that risk at this point, with all the stuff I have to get done, I just can't afford it.
The bottom line is it's really a way of helping us add some insurance to what's going on right before we're going to events. Going to an event is risky enough in terms of health.
Right.
We're going to be around several thousand people that we mostly don't know and a few hundred that we do know.
Right.
And they're going to bring stuff from all over the place.
Yeah. We just don't like to push it. When we go to Pennsylvania, there's literally people there from all over the world. So we are a little conservative, and I actually have some friends after the last couple of years of being masked up for the big virus scare there, shall we say, who said they're just going to wear their masks in the spring because they never had better allergy seasons since they've been adults than then. So there's been times, you'll see me sometimes when I work out in the greenhouse, if I'm doing certain things, I will put on a dust mask, and it's an N95, it's a really good one, because it's just so much better not to irritate my sinuses. Why bother? I mean,
so
we
routinely use masks down in Irene's shop because she works a lot with things that have very finely divided silica. Silica is, I call it sand, quartz, whatever, but it's very, very small particles, and that's known to cause lung problems. And we're around 70.
Why push your luck?
We'd like to live a lot longer and
Yeah,
not
really.
have those kinds of problems.
Yeah.
So we wear the dust mask then. Frequently when we're out working in the garden, we'll wear a dust mask because there's a bunch of junipers that are just off to our east.
Right.
In fact, the entire hill that comes up to our home is all junipers and piñons, and
Right.
this is the time for pollen.
Right, and later in the season, towards the end of the mid to late summer, it'll be ragweed and other stuff.
And
so,
it's time to come in and take a shower to get
Yeah.
all of the pollen off.
Yeah,
So that's why we wear masks.
Yeah.
And it's no
Safety
big deal
and
for
convenience.
us. Yeah, it's no
Doesn't
big deal
bother
to
me.
us. We just put them on. And
the cloth one I was wearing the other day is a completely washable one with the qualifications of about an N95, and you can wash them 100 times before they lose their efficacy. They're comfortable. They don't make you particularly warmer or anything else like that. You can adjust them easily to yourself. I don't see a reason not to wear it. The other day when I was out there and the trees were kind of bugging me, I was really thinking about grabbing one just because. Why do I want to sneeze if I don't have to?
let's talk about something other than masks now. We're changing the way we're gardening and what we're gardening.
Right.
You saw, or maybe you didn't, but you should see that we planted 3 beds of berry plants.
Right.
And we'll see how they do.
Right.
From your perspective, how are they looking?
Okay. I mean, it's been an odd spring so far. The next month is forecast to be cooler than usual, which is
will
great.
be good.
That's really great. If the wind will ever stop blowing, we're going to put permanent irrigation on them. And I still have a couple of other plants that I have to plant. Henry surprised me with some roots for some other flowers.
They might not make it because they're intended for a wetter environment, because that was not in the
Right, I told him
description,
don't
so-
buy from those people anymore. Basically, he picked up something from eBay that sounded good. Then I had to track down, when I got the invoice, what the thing really was, because that's one of the things I emphasize to people when you're buying plants, is choose plants from a group that will give you the actual Latin name. There have to be 1,000 flowers out there with the same stupid name. There's 1,000 vegetables with the same stupid name. It's kind of like we joke about Golden Dragon Chinese restaurant. How many Golden Dragon Chinese restaurants are there in the United States?
Oh,
Thousands,
many.
There's certain phrases that tend to go with, specific ethnic restaurants and stuff like that. So it's the same thing with flowers and plants of all kinds. I wasn't even sure what it was at first. I tracked it down through their website.
I knew what they said it was supposed to be, but it isn't what they advertised at all.
No. And when I went to reputable companies that sell it, I'm like, oh, this is a problem. So I'm going to stick it in the wettest spot that I have in the shade, because most websites show it growing as an understory, even though they say it'll take full sun. Full sun in Arizona at high altitude is different than full sun, say, in Massachusetts at low altitude. So we'll see. I'll do my best, see if we can keep them alive. They're gorgeous if they do, because they do like 2 to 3 foot stalks. I have pretty much, I think, all the rest of my seeds in now. Flower seeds came in this week. I'm running behind, but that's the story of 2023, is I'm running behind. So I will get those in. Tomato seeds, which did not look like they were ever going to come up.
They really popped.
Every single darn one. So now I'm looking at having twice the amount.
So when we planned on how many seeds Irene was going to put into those trays, we said, well, those seeds are 3 or 4 years old, and let's plan on the germination having dropped down substantially. The
Right.
germination previously had been around 90 to 96%.
Yeah,
and
but
so
like,
we said,
say, the Bella Rosa tomato seeds I had were a year or so older than that, and they didn't do anything last year. Well, they didn't all do something this year, but I have way more than I need. So there's a bunch of tomatoes that are up. Excuse me. Peppers have not come up at all.
Yeah, that doesn't necessarily surprise me. We've had peppers take a long time here before.
Yeah, I've had, they say, the books on it will say it can take up to 21 days. Normally, they don't, but since everything else took longer than usual except for the basil and the Thai basil, they did fine. They were up like that. And you're like, okay, so something's alive in here. But I have those all set and going well. everything that's regularly growing in the greenhouse. We've been harvesting broccoli off the new plant. I've been collecting, it's only 3 little plants, so I'm collecting it together in a bag in the fridge so we can have a nice sit-down meal with that. Tons and tons of asparagus from the garden. Lots of lettuce and radishes and spinach from the greenhouse. Very pleased with what's going on so far. Time to kick in more seeds and get going.
Yeah. I've been going through the irrigation and fixing problems. One of the problems with irrigation every year is there's always parts of the irrigation system that don't necessarily drain completely. Well, this year I knew there were going to be 2 spots that would freeze and probably would crack. And yes, both of them froze, both of them cracked. Fortunately, they cracked at the end, so I can cut those ends off and put the new stuff on. That's easy. But I've been replacing a couple of solenoids and some switches, some valves.
As they get older, they just sort of croak sometimes.
But they're not old enough to really need to be replaced. But for some reason, both of these 2 valves developed a leak along a part of the valve that will control the amount of water that can flow into the bed.
I'm thinking next year we may need to put a piece of foam insulation in the top of those because they're underground. But I think that it just got too cold this year. Yeah.
There's no crack in the body of those things,
that's fine.
So it started leaking. So I replaced one, and then I replaced the other one, and it was not a big deal to replace it. It took a little bit of time. Unfortunately, I made a mistake.
Yes. I heard, Rufus got me up last night in the middle of the night, and which is something unusual, but he had a slightly upset stomach yesterday.
Well, I got the valve in, and right before we were getting ready to go into town, because I discovered that a package that was supposed to have been notified the previous day didn't get notified, so we were going into town to the post office on a Sunday and pick it up out of the lockbox, which we did. But I got ready to leave, and I could hear the water running, and I ran the cycle and assumed that turned off the valve.
Right. Well, at 2:30 in the morning when I got up, I could hear the water. I could hear the pump running, which means the water was running somewhere. And at 2:30 in the morning, I was not going to crawl around on the ground with a flashlight to try and find it. So this morning, I realized what had happened is he left one of the valves open.
There's a way.
We have a very soggy bed.
There's a way on those electrically actuated valves to actually manually turn it on, and I didn't realize that that valve had been left in the manual on position.
So I fixed that, and then came in and said, "Good thing we're getting a water delivery this morning." So we got 2 water deliveries instead of 1. So our tanks are back up where they need to be. Sometimes you'll have a valve that'll fail because it'll get sanded.
It'll stick.
Yeah. And usually if you turn it on and off a couple times, that's enough to shake it loose. Some of the very oldest valves we've had to replace just from calcium. These top emitters I clean a couple of times a year. And that's mineral deposits. But usually the regular valves, the only thing we have to do is click them on and off. Somebody will stand near the thing and watch it, see if it goes off, or listen to it, and the other person's turning them on and off. Once on, twice on, it's fine. It works.
So the other piece of the irrigation that I'm going to have to double check is that in the greenhouse right now, Irene's watering by hand. I need to get that changed over to be automated for when we go on this next event, because things still need to be watered while we're gone. So I need to make sure that's running. That should be just fine. I don't see any cracks. I've looked, but one of the problems with irrigation or any kind of PVC is you can have a small crack that's not visible, and when you put water on it, then you'll see the water spurt.
Right. There's times when it's super obvious where you've got this crack the size of the Grand Canyon, and then there's other times where you're like, I don't see any crack, but then you can see this fine spray, and you're like, get to change that piece.
Well, thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications, because we're going to be doing a lot more here on the homestead. We're doing a lot more right now, and we'd have been outside working today, but we just decided the wind was blowing too hard.
Yeah, anytime I had to go outside with Rufus, I killed a few more weeds, because I'm trying to keep the next batch of weeds from depositing new seeds. to reduce the quantity of seeds that are out there. Particularly the fillery, which is it's a pretty little flower. It's just so pretty. But it has these dagger-like seeds that will work their way through. I mean, they're tough enough to work their way through like the seams of your shoes and stuff like that into your feet. And puppy toes and kitty toes and the whole thing, nasty things. They're very tenacious.
In the meantime, I've been working on another automotive problem, actually 3 automotive problems. Mm-hmm. I just got back a vehicle that I'd lent to our former caretaker here, mm-hmm. and I have a bunch of repair that's going to have to be done to that. And I'm diagnosing an air conditioning problem mm-hmm. on the box truck.
At least you've had some input on that.
Because we're going to be heading south, and it's going to be warm. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, it's not going to be as hot as it was last year, but it's still going to be hotter than I want to be in that box truck. Mm-hmm. So I have to get that air conditioning fixed before we leave. So,
and if you have any questions, ask.
Keep brainstorming.
Yep, we do.